Live from the UK, broadcasting around the world, you're listening to Talking Minaret, discussing matters that affect you, streaming to the world and beyond.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to another episode of Talking Minaret, joined by Brother Khalid from Deen Machine.
Assalamu alaikum.
Interesting discussion this week about the Marvel character Thanos. Got a few talking points in relation to this. The first one being in introduction to Thanos' mission and comparing it to Malthusian theory. The second talking point is how Thanos was wrong, ? And also the third talking point is the Islamic solution to the Thanos problem. So almost everyone went to see Avengers. Thanos was the main villain who seeks to destroy half of intelligent life in the universe. Those who voted like Brexit and Britain First lot would be on the side of Thanos. Let me explain. We're going to go into this and the solutions that Islam provides. The basic mission of Thanos is he quickly concluded that since resources are finite as the planet's population grows, there will eventually not be enough food to feed everyone. That's what he's trying to say. His proposed solution was to randomly murder 50% of his kind. Understandably, Thanos was ignored by his people and witnessed the destruction of his homeworld through overpopulation. But then what the guy did is he's thinking, well, in order to prevent the same disaster in other planets, I'm going to go ahead and kill like 50% of the world population or something like that. So we're not going to tackle the clear area of us obviously killing innocent people. We're going to tackle the actual theory behind it. And that theory is actually within like 17th, 18th century theories from a famous essay from a person called Thomas Malthus. He proposed that human population would grow more rapidly than our ability to grow food. That's basically his basic position. And he wrote an essay on the principle of population. His prediction models were all debunked, but then other people latched on. Paul Ehrlich, in his book, The Population Bomb, he made the same prediction as well, but obviously that failed. So there are people who support Thanos, literally. They really do. I've seen YouTube videos of it. And it's based on one of the first things that you learn as an economics student, the fact that the scarcity problem. Human beings possess only limited resources to satisfy our endless needs.
Yeah, I mean, with the Malthusian theory, a lot of people agree with it, and that really, the Malthusian theory sparked again due to the movie Infinity War. And if you do a comparison between Thomas Robert Malthus and what's the purple alien guy? I keep forgetting his name. What's the comparison to the theory? Well, it's actually similar, very, very similar. As you said, that the purple alien dude, he wants to kill half of the population of all non-existence. Thomas Robert Malthus, from the 1800s, he developed a theory that the resources are fixed. All resources and food supplies, everything is fixed. But the population is not fixed, it keeps growing. So he just did a 1-2, like 1 and 1 equals 2 kind of thing, like a really simple, weak math. And he said populations are growing, hence why food can't supply enough population. So you'd rather just kill off but the thing is, he didn't say 50%. You know what he said? He was an elitist, okay? So he said kill off the poor, yeah? He said kill off the poor. While Thanos, I remember his name. While Thanos, he wanted, it doesn't matter who he was 50% of all. But the one thing that he chose was himself, yeah? So because even he said it in the movie that he would see the sun rise in a grateful universe. So he already predicted that he's going to be alive anyway. He kept himself alive. So you can see that there's so many similarities.
There's a bit of elitism there, isn't it?
Yeah, you can say that he thinks he's the chosen one. I mean, who is he? Who chose him?
Yeah. That moves nicely into our second point, how Thanos was wrong. Now, the first point that's clear and it's just so apparent, there is enough food on the planet for everybody. There's also the argument from environmentalists who say that if we have less people, then there would be less change to the environment. But that's just that's nonsense because like 10% of companies contribute to half of the global CO2 emissions. According to other figures, over 71% of global emissions is coming from just 100 companies. So it doesn't really make sense, but okay. The way people argue, it's almost like people are stacked up on top of each other and there's no room. But for instance, in America, for example, a place like Wyoming has so much open space. 95% of the Earth's population is just concentrated on 10% of the Earth's landmass. And if we all lived in the density of, say, Manhattan, then the entire Earth's population could fit into New Zealand.
It's amazing how these environmentalists have low IQ in maths. So that's how it seems like it. Because what they do is they think everything is fixed. Yeah, just like Malthus saw, though everything is fixed. But they didn't factor in the production, innovation. Yeah, they didn't factor in these things. Yeah, so when you factor these things, then the true maths come out. So these environmentalists, just like I'm gonna break people's hearts now. Like Attenborough, yeah. Even he had a documentary out as well. He's saying that humans are causing everything, and we should all do our part, and we shouldn't be breeding that much. He even acknowledged China's, the one birth theory that they have as well. This is the way to do it. So basically, forcing people not to have babies or families, yeah. It's something similar to what happened in 1913, where America had forced the law of basically preventing people from getting married and women being sterilized, and did that. It was all institutionalized, and this was implemented in America. Why? Because they thought that the Malthus theory is the correct theory, just like Attenborough. But I don't want to dig into too much to that old man anyway, but he's wrong, just like most of the environmentalists. Another thing is, you mentioned regarding food supply, and everybody goes, "Oh, there's less food supply and everything like that."
Yeah.
Let's go to the root of the problem. The root of the problem is capitalism. That's what it is. It's the system itself. It's broken. It is determined to fail. Why? Because capitalism, they favor money, profit. For example, let's go into the category of food supply. Now, food supply, these companies, they have a lack of allocation, of food, and so much food is wasted that food, which is good, clean, not out of date, could feed entire China for a year. Yeah, this is the food that's never been touched. It's in date. It's healthy to eat. Good food. Yeah. But the reason why they don't give away to the poor, because people ask, "Oh, why there's so many poor people and everything?" And they say, "Oh, it's because of overpopulation and whatnot." We'll get into that subject later on. But the food supply, the reason why companies don't give food out, because it costs them more. It costs them more. So they rather throw away that food supply, the excess food, and just throw it away in the dumpster because it's cheaper for them.
Just thinking about it, just the logistics of food distribution and things like that, and getting it out to those who need it or whatever it might be. From a capitalist mindset and from an individualistic mindset, it's very much, well, if I can gain profit over a product, I will. However, if then I need to distribute that product or whatever it is, then that's going to cost me more, and I don't want to do that.
That unfortunately a lot of people think like that, but you can't blame them. You can't blame the individuals because they're a product of the system. They're living in this system. Okay, if you plant an apple tree, you're not gonna get lemons. You're gonna get apples. So you know what I mean. So this is the point. So again, these companies, they're not how can I say, they're not persuaded in such a way that they're gonna give free food away. They rather lose their food anyway. Because it's cheaper. So it's better for them. Because companies are more favorable towards making money than the quality of life. Throughout this podcast, I want the listeners to always think about this quality of life and profit and compare it. Yeah. And you will see that the ideology, capitalism, it's all about expediency. Morals and good character goes out the way. It's gone. But really, you need to really focus on is the fact that they really give a damn about profit.
You know what? On my last podcast with some brothers, we were talking about mental health. Right. And I think we touched on capitalism a bit, slightly. and we talked about how they valued the materialistic value over everything else, the spiritual, moral, humanitarian values. They didn't even that was the priority, materialistic value. That was the priority. I think it aligns with what you're saying right now. I mean, like, let's be honest. The belief in overpopulation usually serves those who believe that they are the superior race. I mean, like, does that remind you of anything, really? Like Nazi Germany and all that stuff? But anyways, this ideology of capitalism usually puts the blame on, like, say, poor people or the non-white countries.
Yeah.
I don't want to turn this into a white versus black or brown, whatever it is, but let's be frank. Usually, there's a certain class of people right at the top. And I'm gonna go turn this into a race debate because, in all honesty, this is an ideology debate, and the failures of capitalism is what results in this kind of method of thinking where they try to put the blame on overpopulation or whatever it might be in order to detract the blame from the ideology itself.
You mentioned regarding Hitler, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of environmentalists, they don't want to mention him. But he goes in line with their theory, with the Malthusian theory. Okay, so this goes in line with regarding this whole notion of, it's over, the world is overpopulated, or it's going to become overpopulated. There's not enough room. They make it seem like we're living on top of each other. But to be honest, as you mentioned earlier on, there's so much space in this world, that if you think about it this way, let's look at it this way: 95% of the population is only concentrated on 10% of landmass. 10%. If you look at, let's be selective with countries, right? Okay, let's look at England, UK. The Queen and her, and obviously you got the, their family members, and the royal family members, the lords and the sirs, all of them, they own half of England. Basically, 1% of its population is owned by half of England, and most of them are from these sirs and these lords and these knights and these queen and princesses, whatever they are. They're the one, and they hoard this land. They hoard it. So if you think about it this way, there is so much space, but it's not being used. It's not being used, and studies show that these countrysides, these lands that they have, right? It hasn't been used for years. It's just been kept there, right? And if you go and trespass, so that's why, I don't know if you notice, but if you go to these lands which have been hoarded for years, you'll often see a lot of like poor people, homeless people living there, and most of them get caught anyway, and they get fined, they get jailed, and they get shifted back into the system, and obviously that recycle happens, and they become even more worse. But the point is the fact that these homeless people got a point. They're not using it, So why are they still going? So this just shows that even in England, right, there's so much space. There's so much space.
And you know what? This idea, originally Malthusian theory, has been propagated so much in propaganda.
Oh yeah.
Look at films like not just Avengers, and this, but like Soylent Green, Inferno, Logan's Run, Ready Player One. When you watch these films, it reminds you that there is too many human beings on the planet, and it's propaganda. Instead of facing the real fact of the problem is the ideology, i.e. capitalism. Every post-apocalyptic film is just full of people, they're living in tents or something, and they're living on top of each other, and it's just propaganda, honestly. They make it seem like the humans are the problems rather than facing the fact that it's the capitalism, the ideology that's the problem. And these same people will then say it is only crony capitalism, like bad capitalism, that's the problem. And they want you to believe that if only there was some reform, then everything will be okay again. But tweaking the system or whatever it might be to make a change is fantasy. And you know what I realized? It's interesting that Thanos, when he controlled all the Infinity Stones, he initiated a radical change. And in fact, even though the solution is wrong, obviously, clearly, He understood that the change that was required for the universe had to be radical. And this whole just adjusting capitalism a bit, that doesn't work.
Let's be honest, Hitler was voted through a democratic process, just like how Trump and then obviously now President-elect Biden, they were voted through a democratic process. Hitler was evil. Okay, but the thing is, what's the difference between Hitler trying to make the best human race and the killing of mass population in Germany, then what happened in 1913 in America, where they was forcing families not to have families, forcing people not to get married, and forcing women to get sterilized? What's the difference? There's no difference. Just because you do it with the needle and that guy does it with the gun, it's the same thing. It all goes down to the failure of the ideology itself, depending on expediency. I know you don't want to make it look like it's a race podcast. They like to shift the blame on the brown people, on the black people, or the minorities, and they don't want to shift the blame onto themselves. Okay, but the thing is, Africa, only contributes 3% of greenhouse gas emissions. Yeah, 3%. Yeah, but then as we mentioned previously on, compare this 3% to 71% coming from 100 companies. Yeah, and more than half of consumer gas emissions are coming from 10% of the elites. How can you blame the poor? It just doesn't make sense whatsoever. Because why? Because they want to preserve themselves. These capitalists, they want to preserve themselves and keep on moving forward, while the poor, the middle class, the working class, they don't have no say. And the ones at the top, they'll be the one who would making the decisions for them, because apparently they're chosen, just like Thanos was chosen.
Just some figures for you in relation to population. The world's population is approximately 7.3 billion. According to the United Nations predictions, it could reach 9.7 billion people by 2050 and over 11 billion by 2100. On the face of it, the global impact of adding several billion people to these urban centers might be surprisingly small, actually. This is because, people who live in these areas, they're usually in low or middle income countries. And historically, low or middle income countries, they consume little. Overpopulation is an appealing emotional concept for many. With refugees, poverty, malnutrition, and hunger broadcast onto televisions around the world every day, emotional pictures are more convincing than facts. However, population explosion is a myth, even with all this propaganda that's going around. Today we have like 7.3 billion people. Roughly 1 in 8 of us doesn't have enough to eat, even though there's enough food on the planet. If we consider a grain-based diet with an already moderate consumption of protein, the current world cereals production could feed more than 10 billion people if distributed well. So where does that theory go? The fact that there's not enough to go around. It's ridiculous. You mentioned about waste, food waste and stuff, and if there's a proper distribution of that. Do you know that the average European is wasting 179 kilograms of food on average? On top of that, fertility has gone down almost everywhere in the world, even in the Muslim lands, is going down. So that's according to the UN. This, it's like the whole Gladio B operations and things like that.
Yeah.
They're just trying to fearmonger without actually addressing the actual problem, which is the ideology itself.
Even then, like you mentioned regarding poor people, right? And how 1 in 8 they don't have food, right? And that's sad, because we do have food, and it shouldn't be 1 in 8. It should be 0. There's food to go around. But what happens is this, public opinion changes. And the way to change public opinion is by educating the masses in the wrong way, giving them false information. So, for example, energy companies, they knew about global warming since day one. Yeah, they knew about this. What they did was they they hired right-wing think tanks to develop these theories. Obviously, you got the father of these theories called Malthusian theory, but then they developed these little mini theories regarding overpopulation, food supplies, and there's not no food supplies going around. These energy companies and so many other companies, but energy companies itself, they hire right wing think tanks. They also buy politicians, give them money for their campaigns so they can support them back, right? So it's like a vicious circle which is taking place. And I feel sorry for the people that, kind of believe in the system, a failing system. Like, for example, I mentioned it just about 2 seconds ago regarding wealth distribution. There's so much, the poverty level is rising every single year. I thought, and I'm talking about America, globally it is, but also America. But I thought America, with that capitalistic ideology, I thought that's where all the dreams are. But it seems to me this isn't the fact. Because why? Because the system is hell bent on the production of wealth, but they don't care about the distribution of wealth. Okay, I'll give you an example. If I put I don't know, like $10 million on a table, okay, $10 million on a table. Who has the most advantage to get that 10 million? Is it the poor people who doesn't have enough resources and facilities, or is it the ones which are the rich people who have so much sway, yeah, and so many connections? Yeah, who would get it? Who would get the most of it? It'd be the rich. It'd be the elitists. They'll get most of it, and the one penny that is left over, yeah, the poor will be, skirming around just to get 1p, yeah. And this is the reality of capitalism. This is why the rich stay rich and the poor stay poor. There's always, and the gap is expanding every single year. It's all about expediency.
I get that, and it goes nicely onto our third talking point, which is the Islamic solution to the Thanos problem. But before we give the Islamic solution, we have to touch on the ideology of capitalism and the solutions or / injustices it provides to make it look like that human population is the problem. The capitalist elites are the problem and the man-made system. Let's look at some of the economics behind this.
Yeah.
This so-called amazing system. When people are self-employed, they use tax-deductible expenses. For example, honestly, there are people who have gone on holiday, but as long as they have, say, one business meeting on that holiday, then they claim it back on expenses. Owning a company is the best way for a company to avoid tax. Usually people pay tax on money before they receive it, but company owners can pay tax on the money earned almost 2 years after they've earned it. I'm not stopping there. Let's go across the pond. Like £5.3 trillion is stored in offshore tax havens. Projections say that corporate and personal tax avoidance costs the world $700 billion a year. Tax havens are used. A tax haven could be like a country like Bermuda or the Cayman Islands or whatever it is. So the UK corporate tax rate is like 19%, yeah? But say in the Cayman Islands it's 0%, or in say Switzerland it's 8.5%. So what do companies do? So what they do is they put the patent or the code or the formula or the algorithm or the product, whatever it is, in the low tax country. They register it there. And this makes the assets legally reside in that low tax country. So then the asset resides in the low tax country, so they can funnel profits to the low tax country, to the trustees, to the beneficiaries, and passing them off as payments for the patent. So basically, because it's offloaded in that low tax country, that's a way of tax avoidance that some of these companies use. It's going back to the main thing about the distribution of wealth that capitalism does not guarantee. The system is rigged. Even if you look at companies like like Tesla, Elon Musk, like he must have loads of tax incentives. So like the government will grant him huge research and development tax benefits. So money off tax basically. Even McDonald's, you probably think that McDonald's is like McDonald's' main business is selling burgers or whatever it is, yeah. But reality is most of McDonald's business, I think, is based on real estate, because they probably pay near enough 0% tax because they're an investor, and you know, a company that's investing, there's a lot of tax rebates from the government because they're investing into the public and providing jobs. So I mean, like, I think I saw one stat that McDonald's owns more real estate than the Catholic Church.
Because every restaurant of theirs is a property that they own.
Like, everybody who thinks that they live in a fair system and like everybody's paying their fair deal of tax, it's just nonsense. It doesn't even make sense. But let's talk briefly about the Islamic standpoint and the Islamic system, because I've talked about a lot about tax and things like that in the capitalist system. The one obvious one is zakat. Zakat is collected from the property of Muslims and not non-Muslims. So non-Muslims don't pay zakat under Islam in a Khilafah state. It achieves the spiritual value the zakat does. It is not even seen as a tax. When we pay tax as Muslims, we don't see it as a tax. We do it because it achieves that spiritual value. So zakat is...
Of Allah.
Yeah, it's for the sake of Allah. Zakat is 2.5% of an individual's wealth for those who have met the nisab or over. There are 8 categories of disposal stipulated in the Quran for it. Back to the topic of non-Muslims, they would pay the jizya within the Khilafah state. The jizya is only imposed on men, in fact. It's not levied on women. It's not even levied on children either, nor is it levied on the insane people. Whoever has, you know, mental disorders or whatever it might be. And even if a woman came to live in Darul Islam and offered to pay the jizya in exchange for her right to abode, she is allowed in Darul Islam and would be given leave to reside, and no jizya would be levied from her. You know how there's like, with zakat it's fixed 2.5%. With jizya, it's not fixed like that. It's down to the opinion of the imam and his own ijtihad. You know, there's other taxes like the ushur and the kharaj tax, which are land taxes. Won't go into that. There's the customs taxes as well. And for your knowledge also, I know we have customs taxes and things like that in the, UK, whatever it is, but it's prohibited under Islam that they are collected from Muslims and also dhimmis, so that, the Jews or Christians, whatever it might be. Other than the taxes that the Sharia has prescribed, absolutely no other tax should be taken. So I've explained the taxations and the loopholes, if you will, in capitalism, and also taxation in Islam, if you want to call it that. Let's bring it back to capitalism, because that's where we started off on, and how capitalism is the problem. Not that there's too many mouths to feed, as that purple guy stated. What capitalism attempts to resolve is the satisfaction of an ever-growing human needs, using insufficient resources and means of satisfaction. And this is the essence of relative scarcity. When people measure the economic growth of a country, what do they measure? They measure production, what the country is producing. They look at GDP, gross domestic product, and that's how they value a country's economics. But there's some serious flaws with the principle of scarcity. So capitalism, in essence, it views the economic problem which faces any society to be the scarcity of commodities and services. Remind you of anybody? That purple guy from Avengers? It claims that the human needs are steadily increasing, and that the products continue to be scarce to satisfy the growing needs of people. So, but what we say is the fact that in Islam there are basic needs, and then there are the luxuries. The basic needs being the food, shelter, clothing, whatever it might be, and that's what Islam guarantees when it's implemented. That's what it guarantees. And not the luxuries, although they are sought as well by human beings. Which is fine. I'm not saying it's haram to seek out the luxuries, but what's guaranteed first is the food, shelter, education, health, and clothing. And that's what capitalism doesn't see. It just sees so-called unlimited needs. It doesn't come to guarantee the basic needs. Under Islam, these basic needs are guaranteed. Islam also obliges that wealth is circulated amongst the people. Islam also forbade the hoarding of gold and silver. Islam allows individual open ownership, fair enough. It's not like communism or something. But Islam has determined the manner of disposal. So, i.e., it'd be haram for you to, trade in stocks. So the manner of disposal is determined by the Deen, and individual ownership is allowed in Islam. But this system that we have in capitalism, where it's you have the hoarding of wealth and also monopolies. Monopolies are prevented absolutely in Islam. It's forbidden in the Sharia. That's down to the hadith in Bukhari by the Prophet ﷺ, where he said, "No one monopolizes except the wrongdoer." So the monopolizer is the one who hoards the commodities until the price rises, so as to sell them expensively, such as it becomes difficult for the citizens to obtain them or buy them, whatever it might be. I also mentioned about hoarding. I mean, like the hoarding of gold and silver. Allah says in the Quran, Surah Tawbah, verse 32, "And let those who hoard gold and silver and do not spend them in the way of Allah know that a severe and painful punishment is awaiting them." So Islam has a whole bunch of checks and balances, which is good for Muslims to understand. It illustrates the Islamic system. As in, like, it's not just a system where I've heard some brothers speak about Islam in just purely in the manner of, oh, Islam restricts interest, riba, and that's literally, I'm sure you've heard it as well, but they don't go any further than that. I just want to make one more point, because we've talked a lot about the circulation of wealth and capitalist elite and things like that. So how does Islam prevent that? Islam has made the circulation of currency between all citizens an obligation. Also, Allah says in the Quran, "Lest it circulates solely among the wealthy from among you." That's in Surah Al-Hashr, verse 7. So the circulation of currency, it has to be guaranteed. It's an obligation. When the Prophet ﷺ realized that there had been a disparity in wealth between the Muhajirin and the Ansar, he divided the wealth gained from Banu Nadir exclusively amongst the Muhajirin in order to generate economic balance. The Messenger of Allah divided among the Muhajirin and did not give any of it to the Ansar except to a few individuals who both were at the time poor, just like the Muhajirin. And so in the Hadith, it was reported that the Ansar said, "We would rather share our homes and wealth with our brothers and let them have the wealth as well." So Islam is that solution that provides that connection, that fraternity, that brotherhood between Muslims. We talked earlier on about the value that's sought after most in actions under capitalism is a materialistic one, whilst Islam allows the materialistic value to be sought, 100%, that's fine. However, you'll find there's other values that they're sought, such as the spiritual value in actions, the humanitarian values in actions, or the moral values. Like, it's not just heightened materialistic value in action that's sought. So I've given you a bit of an overview on some of the intricacies of the Islamic economic system, and it really, and Muslims should really study this, because this is the solution given to us by Allah and the Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. I think you even heard yourself. How many people say Islam is a solution to everything? Well, it is.
Yeah, alhamdulillah, mashallah, you literally put Islam in the proper limelight, and it should be, because we know as Muslims that risk, what does risk mean? So Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if He wants you to have a family, you will have a family. If He wants you to have £1 million, you'll have £1 million, no matter what. It is all written. If we take a look back in the history and where you have the Khilafah state, it was geared towards developing the nation, under the Islamic rule, to better people's lifestyles, Muslims' lifestyles, and also the citizens who are non-Muslims that are living under the Islamic rule, even their lifestyles. And people love this lifestyle. It worked. People think that Islam came over and forced Islam onto people, but in actuality, that's not the case. The case is they broke through the barriers of the dawah, and then they implemented the Islamic system onto the people. They didn't force people to become Muslims, but the people became Muslim in itself. Because why? Because the fruits of the system working. So you see that people became Muslims after witnessing and observing the Islamic system. But in capitalism, what happens? Like Iraq, like Syria, even in America, people say that there is no other system out there. We have no other choice. But when Islam was on top and the ideology was being implemented, not only did they become Muslim, they become mu'min. They were advocates about this. They used to write so many books on this. They worked. So you see the comparison that capitalism is not working, and Islam is a true solution. The khair. Well, unfortunately, the ummah is in a coma. Yeah, and we have to wake up. We have to talk about these things. And like you were saying, like, oh, everybody says Islam is a solution for everything. Yeah, it is, but you need to look into it. People need to look into it.
Well, that's a good point. There's a good point to end it on. Have a check out of Deen Machine's channel. It's on YouTube. Subscribe on YouTube and all the major podcast providers. And Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.